There's some anxiety that's just you're shaking and jittery, but it doesn't feel as emotional. There's some that's like really dark thoughts, like it gets in your head. Like I found lead poisoning created really dark, hopeless, like suicidal thoughts. They have different impacts on your brain function, on the quality of thoughts. You have the perceptual prism through which you see reality, like how negative or hopeless it feels, how externally mediated versus internally driven it feels, how emotional it feels, whether it's more of a tremble or a shake, or whether you're feeling it more in your guts, and how much inflammation you have, and how many additional symptoms you have besides just the anxiety. Because one thing I've found in my practice is I've never found anyone with chronic anxiety that just had anxiety. Every single person has had some kind of health issues that were driving it. Because if you go to therapy and you're doing positive thinking and therapy and meditation, all that stuff, and you still have anxiety, you need to check your biology.
Welcome to Harmonic Alignment, a podcast that explores the new frontier of energy medicine, bridging the gap between Western medicine and quantum physics, giving you easy and practical solutions. Guided by me, Dr. Larisa Sharipova, and me, Priscilla Koblenz. Join us on a journey discovering your harmonic alignment. On today's episode of Harmonic Alignment, Dr. Larisa Sharipova connects with Dr. Traci Potterf. Dr. Traci has a PhD in medical anthropology, and she has turned herself into a functional medicine anxiety detective. She has an incredible story. She has overcome some serious health challenges. So if you have a loved one or you yourself are going through one of those health challenges and it's taking forever and you're not making progress, have hope. Because if she overcame anxiety, PTSD, Lyme, weight loss, toxic mold, and lead exposure, all of these things are layers that she peeled back to uncover the root cause, which she goes into what is root cause, really unpacks that so you can have an understanding is just because you heal a symptom doesn't mean you've gotten to that final layer, that root cause. You can check out Traci's work at innergeniushealth.com. This is a fantastic episode. She is an incredible practitioner who is returning back to nature and sharing her wisdom, indigenous wisdom, with all.
Welcome to Harmonic Alignment Podcast. Today, I have a pleasure to have a conversation with Dr. Traci Potterf, who had such a unique journey from earning a PhD in medical anthropology at University of California at Berkeley, at University of California at San Francisco, to become a functional anxiety detective. Welcome to the show, Dr. Traci.
Thank you.
Can you tell us how your personal and professional path brought you to this work that you do now?
I think, like so many people, I got really sick, and I also thought I was going crazy because my anxiety was so bad. When I was 19, I had my first panic attack, and my dad was the psychiatrist, and I grew up helping out in his office and going with him to see patients when I was little. And, I always saw people with mental health issues as those people over there that I felt bad for. And then suddenly I was those people. And back then they were saying it's a genetic chemical imbalance, implying it was all genetic. And I didn't want that to be my identity. And I didn't want that to be my gift of a precious life. I didn't want to live like that. So I decided I'm going to figure this out somehow. I didn't know how, but I was just determined to figure it out. And so I was able to really overcome it through a lot of lifestyle changes. But then I eventually went on to live in a house in Hawaii that had terrible toxic mold and lead paint. I also ended up with Lyme. It was horrifying. It really screwed with my head. Whenever you have any kind of illness that affects your brain and nervous system, that poisons your brain and causes inflammation of the brain and damages brain function, then one of the first symptoms you're going to get is anxiety. And that's why, just as I was on the other side of that, I moved from being a generalist. So I literally sat down and meditated. And after I'd been through that, I was like, okay, how can I help? I want to use this horrific pain. I was having suicidal ideations. I wasn't going to do it, but my brain was telling me there was no hope and I should just kill myself. I just asked God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, the Godiverse, just tell me how I can serve. I want to serve. And so a few hours later, I was parking my car and I just started having tingles all over. I went into a euphoric state of bliss. I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose, just saying, you're going to be an anxiety detective and you're going to help people find and fix the hidden causes of anxiety, because anxiety is a smoke alarm. It's a symptom, not a disorder. and you're going to use all your knowledge of how to overcome all these biotoxic illnesses like Lyme mold, gut issues, hormone stuff, all the things, because I've been through it personally and then professionally. And I feel like often you attract a lot of people based on what's happened in your life, right? And then you're able to help people who have been through things that are similar.
So what would you say were your causes of anxiety and how you overcome your anxiety? What you use in your healing journey?
That's a really good question because we have one word for anxiety, but there's so many causes, so many causes. A lot of us use the metaphor of like a bucket of burdens of how many things your body can handle before it starts breaking down. And anxiety is just this smoke alarm. It's saying, hey, I don't feel safe. Something's wrong. I need nurture. I need help. And instead of figuring out what's causing the fire and putting out the fire, our medical system and our culture just want to take the battery out of the smoke alarm so it'll stop making noise. They want to silence the symptom instead of finding what's going on, right? So I had so many causes. My dad had severe PTSD, had a horrendously abusive, deprived childhood, and was closet gay and had a lot of rage and anger and what we used to call Asperger's. So I had PTSD kind of anxiety. I had anxiety from a crappy lifestyle, from loving, to eat tons of Reese's peanut butter cups and Snickers and Dr. Pepper and ramen microwave noodles and pizza with ranch dressing. I just didn't take care of myself. I wasn't very physically active. I was just all in my head. I was like super academic, but I was disconnected from my body, from a lot of my emotions, even though I was very intuitive and an empath. Like I still didn't know how to wield myself. Then as I healed that layer, I love to travel internationally. So I've gotten some different kinds of parasites that have affected my mental health. And then eventually that health crisis I told you, where it was Lyme mold and lead poisoning, the mold and the lead poisoning from paint in my house and mold in my house. And then I was so immune suppressed from the mold and the lead that I ended up with Lyme also. And literally my kidneys were shutting down and my brain wasn't working. I was having really horrible visual problems, tinnitus, aches and pains. I was in so much physical pain. It was miserable, no energy, brain fog, could barely function, couldn't really work for the better part of 2 years. It was horrendous. So along the way, I had to find what caused each thing. So the way I overcame each thing, like changing my lifestyle, falling in love with a new way of living that worked with my body. It's funny how people think if I eat healthy or take care of myself, I'm going to give up some great pleasure of whatever I call those cheap thrills, like things that seem to give you a few minutes of pleasure in the moment, but then they're just literally killing your soul and your cells. I lived in Spain a couple years, getting out of the United States, basically. And so I just lost 50 pounds without dieting, living in Spain. And I ate a lot of food and it was delicious and I had a really good time. And I was like, you mean you can just like lose weight, having a good time, being happy? Wow, this is amazing. And that's why I became very aware of our food system and our lifestyle. And I realized we're told we're overweight because of genetics, and really it's an environmental problem, it's a cultural problem. So each kind of anxiety had a different causes. So I had to get rid of the parasites and heal my gut. For that kind, I had to detoxify lead and mold. And it's interesting because the progression, as I got different kinds of anxiety, the skill level needed to resolve it became increasingly more stealth. I was already trained in that stuff. I knew theoretically what to do, but to live it in your body and then try to heal from it at the same time, that was a lot. So I definitely brought in help from other people.
Thank you for sharing your story. You said there is a different anxiety from mold, anxiety from Lyme. Do you have a different feeling, even though we call it one anxiety?
Yeah, when I was in anthropology, and this is something a lot of us have heard about, that, Inuit people have like 100 words for snow, but we only have one word for snow. And so there's some anxiety that's just you're shaking and jittery, but it doesn't feel as emotional. There's some that's like really dark thoughts, like it gets in your head. Like I found lead poisoning created really dark, hopeless, like suicidal thoughts. They have different impacts on your brain function, on the quality of thoughts. You have the perceptual prism through which you see reality, like how negative or hopeless it feels, how externally mediated versus internally driven it feels, how emotional it feels, whether it's more of a tremble or a shake, or whether you're feeling it more in your guts, and how much inflammation you have and how many additional symptoms you have besides just the anxiety. Because one thing I've found in my practice is I've never found anyone with chronic anxiety that just had anxiety. Every single person has had some kind of health issues that were driving it. Because if you go to therapy and you're doing positive thinking and therapy and meditation, all that stuff, and you still have anxiety, you need to check your biology.
So now going through all your healing journey and learning, that's why you become a detective, because now when you work with clients, you probably can detect what kind of anxiety based on their symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. I look at their lifestyle. I look at kind of how they think, how they present, how their thought forms, and other symptoms besides the quality of the anxiety. And then labs too. I do like to run labs, although a lot of stuff you can really tell from symptoms. So
Yeah. Mm. Being a daughter of a psychiatrist and healing your own anxiety and struggling with that, and see a different side of anxiety, how do you see from traditional standpoint how it's treated anxiety or even diagnosed, and from your standpoint now from a holistic approach?
You were trained as a medical doctor, right? And so it's like, oh, this is just a chemical imbalance, and so we're just going to suppress the symptoms. We're going to use benzos, or maybe we use SSRIs that are traditionally used as antidepressants, but we'll use those for anxiety too. And we'll just identify a couple of chemical pathways and try to interrupt them to change the symptom, but we're not going to dig any deeper and look at deeper biological drivers that could be causing it, right? As opposed to the functional, which, we all say root cause because that's the point. We're looking at the underlying cause. And I love to dig deeper than even the biology, because then what caused that in the biology? They have hyperthyroid, or if their estrogen is tanked, or they have low testosterone, or they have high free copper, or they have a parasite. What left them open to that? What caused that? And not only going deeper into their lifestyle, their environment, right? But their emotional patterning and thoughts and like unconscious drivers of biology, and also history of trauma, because we know from data that people who've had worse PTSD or trauma are more likely to have chronic complex illnesses. We know that the nervous system and the immune system are interlinked. They're not separate systems at all. For example, we know our vagus nerve modulates or controls, it's like the gas and the brakes on our cytokine storms, which is like an inflammatory response we heard about during the COVID epidemic. So we know that our nervous system state is going to affect our immune function and put it in hyperdrive, or make certain parts overreact, certain parts under respond. And so it's all connected, and we don't even have language in our culture for the mind and body is one thing. We talk about them separately. We can say mind body with a hyphen, and even putting one in front of the other kind of weights one side. Yeah, the way we're looking at reality is so not what reality is.
So what's reality from your perspective of anxiety?
Well, it's very subjective. I guess a lot of the language we're using now in quantum medicine, like a unified field theory, or, a field of quantum potential, a unified field of consciousness that's like manifesting as frequency, that it's certain that can manifest as atoms and matter and all that, but it's still all consciousness. It's still all energy, right? When I was a medical anthropologist, what I was really fascinated by, and I think this is all intuitive, I think we know this, I saw that when indigenous populations or traditional rural communities started adopting an industrialized lifestyle, started eating processed foods, started drinking soda, started using like toxic cleaning things or shampoos or conditioners or perfumes and whatever, bug sprays and pesticides and fertilizer, all these chemicals and all this processed food. And when they started doing all these things, what happened? They not only developed chronic disease, like cancer and heart disease and dental things and heart things, and basically all the organs start going like, what are you doing to me? But what happened? They developed severe mental illness too. So when I lived in Cuba, everyone's talking about nervios. So they're in a political situation, right? And they're under the stress of this dictatorship, and then they have this material financial shortage, and then they're also eating, some really good stuff, but also eating some crap and using toxic chemicals. And the government would go around and spray. They're trying to prevent dengue outbreaks, so they'll go around and spray these like horrendous pesticides. You had no choice. The government comes around, it fogs the crap out of your house with pesticides. And then they like had these pellets you put in the water tanks where you kept your water. I mean, it's just, come on, people. Come on, humans. I just realized we're not living how we evolved to live, and we've normalized this toxic culture that's trying to override and conquer nature instead of work with its vast intelligence from a place of humility and awe.
And it's not only Cuba, not Mexico.
Of course not. It's the whole planet.
Government spray everywhere without asking you, and put in the water some stuff that it shouldn't be in our body, right? So it's common for everywhere in the world. As you said, we need to be more in nature. Nature provides everything. And you said about intelligence of nature. So how can it support our healing or our life? What is your take about how nature can provide for us, what it can provide?
Yeah, well, even simple little cute things like when I was in Cuba, there was this little pod that would grow on a tree. It was like a little cucumber, but if you would rub it on a stain, it worked as a stain remover. And people are using soap nuts to wash their clothes, So I think just in a broad sweep, there are a few layers, right? There's the more like super obvious material mundane layer of like the products we're buying and using in our homes, on our bodies, the food we're eating, where it's sourced. I'm so excited. There's so much conversation about that. That's like a normal conversation to have because when I first cared about it, like I was a witch and a demon and a heretic and whatever. I don't know if you went through that, but becoming the artist of your life and creating a life that is more aligned with how we evolved to live. Like I'm sitting on a chair that's designed for squatting, kneeling, and cross-legged sitting as opposed to sitting in a regular chair. And I stand a lot actually to work and to move our bodies and to get morning sunlight, like all these biohacking things. It's funny we call it biohacking because it sounds so violent and forceful. But really, I mean, it's like bio nurturing. It just doesn't sound as cool or as like macho or whatever. But making choices that are more aligned with our primal biology, hugs. Like there's a cute little doggy here. Like I love getting snuggles from the doggy. I love that we can connect on Zoom, but I'm also really trying to carve out time to be with humans, to dance, to move, to go out hiking in nature, all these things that seem so simple. And I'll tell you, when I was so sick, my brain was saying there's no way out, you should just kill yourself. But then I was like, I can't do that to my mom. And there was one morning when it was like in the middle of the night in Hawaii. And I woke up and it was so loud in my head, the hopelessness, the fear, the terror, I felt like my health was like water pouring through my hands. I was trying to grab onto it and I couldn't. And I called this really close friend of mine, this beautiful friend, Nicole, and she was visiting family on the East Coast. So she was awake. And she said, what does your body want? What does your inner genius want? And I just closed my eyes. And then it was just like, I just want to go lay on the earth under a tree and hear the ocean. My body was like, I just want to be on the earth and I want to do nothing. And I want to sleep a lot. So that's when I instituted what I called Operation Radical Rest, which was sleeping like a gangster, like trying to sleep as much as possible, 10 hours in bed minimum. And that, of course, I had to let laundry go. I had to let things pile up. I had to like let go of a lot of the social conditioning around being productive. And I would spend time like lying on the earth, just breathing and doing a lot of the tools I have, thank God, and using my consciousness to direct my healing and to surrender and let something bigger than myself heal me and stop trying to figure it all out with my intellect. And then I really had huge results from sauna and cold plunge, as much from the cold as from the heat, from spending time in nature, from sunlight, from breathing, just the most basic things of heat, cold, breath, stillness, consciousness. So there's all the lifestyle changes, which are important. And we can definitely do powerful things with supplements. You can do powerful things with energy and frequency, but just the layer of consciousness of really surrendering. That's why I teach all my clients, whether you think you can meditate or not. My clients come in like, I can't meditate, I hate breath work. And by the end of it, they love it. And it's magical. They're tapping in to another dimension of consciousness that's so beautiful. They're in love with it and they heal faster. So that deeper layer, that's what I think is the most powerful healer, even though there are very high-tech tools we can use.
Well, we can start from free that is around us, right? You can go grounded, walking on the earth bare feet, or you can, as you said, you lie down to get energy from the Mother Earth. And that's the frequency that our body resonate with. And this is a powerful healing tool. And you don't need to pay for it. Just find the clean grass, right? The clean ocean, and just go and connect to nature. That's how you recharge your body battery and get your energy. And that's powerful healing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was such a lesson for me. That's why when I revamped my whole program after what I went through, I do a 6 to 9 month program and it works. Like people come in and they have anxiety and sometimes they're really sick with really complex word stuff. They've been to so many doctors and not resolved, and they've done stem cells and they've done peptides. And I'm not against these therapies, by the way. Let me just be clear. I work with supplements. I'm not saying these things are bad, but they've spent all this money doing all these things. But some of the most basic, simple things like working with their nervous system and shifting their consciousness and working through their emotions and connecting with the earth, realigning with Earth's rhythms, like designing a life they're in love with. And questioning blocks to designing a life they're in love with so that they fall in love with it and then they have a pleasure-driven life. I see these people sometimes on social media that are making pleasure seem like less spiritual. We're wired for pleasure, and they're just different kinds of pleasure. So there's the cheap pleasure, like the quick dopamine hit of this addictive thing, alcohol, sugar, online shopping, whatever. And I'm not saying you can't do those things. I'm just telling you those are like gonna wire you to be depressed and sad and anhedonic and have trouble feeling pleasure. But then there are things that take a little effort on the front end, like exercise and movement and dancing and playing and building relationships and connecting and working through your emotional things and sitting and feeling your emotions and releasing them by feeling them and not by suppressing them. Those things take a little more effort, but the yield is like 1,000 times the effort that went into them, whereas these take no effort and the yield is like negative in the long run, right?
Speaking about your program, what are some common energetic patterns or imbalances you see in people struggling with anxiety? And how do you help clients to repattern their energy?
It's funny how, I know you know this, like how people can be so similar and so different all at the same time, how there's this common thread of humanity and cultural tendencies and stuff, especially working with Americans. I don't want to overgeneralize because I see this in women and men, but a lot of the men who come to me, they're like more, bigger, harder, faster. And everything is like big doses of things and let's kill things and let's conquer and fight. And they're just like more, go, 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 And they actually need to become more yin. They need more nurture. They need to slow down. They need to really deal with why they're drinking alcohol and also unshame sexual drive and sexuality or sexual issues in their relationships and things like that, right? And this happens with women too, to some degree, but I'm just kind of generalizing. And I'm talking about hetero, cis normative. I know there's a whole spectrum of gender and sexual identity, but I see with more like female women presenting humans, I need to be perfect. I need to perform to get love. I need to give to everybody except myself. I need to deny my own needs and put everything else ahead of me, even people without children. I'm single with no children, and I still like that's an impulse I have, a drive and a conditioning I have. I want to take care of my clients and my business and my friends and my mom and everybody and my brother and my nephew and whatever, and this little doggy and whatever, and not me, And so those are just not being aware of our energy bank account and the true cost of things, of little daily life decisions, just being disconnected from the true impact of how we're breathing, how we're moving, what we're eating, what we're drinking, if we're going to the bathroom when we need to pee, if we're moving fast or slow, How many times do we say that I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick? I catch myself wanting to say that. And so my inner joke is I'm going to saunter to the bathroom and I'm going to breathe really slow through my nose. And I'm going to use this moment of transition to slow down my whole system and get in a flow state and get in the magic and become receptive. And I think there's so much cultural programming around pushing out and doing and thinking and analyzing and disconnecting from our bodies. And we've almost made it like if we're feeling and we're intuitive and we're receptive and we surrender, that's some kind of weakness. But that's where the greatest safety and magic happens.
Last weekend, I went to women's conference. We have like over 100 women. Everyone share the same thing. We care about everyone and we forget about ourselves.
Right.
Everyone have the same problem, and what's end up we get sick mentally, physically, and forget about our own health and happiness because we try to help everyone, and it's problem around a globe. I would say it's not only our American problem.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, and I think because it comes like as a conditioning. Yes, that's women and nurturer, so we have to nurture everyone. But how about us, our own nurturing? And I publish a book. It's called "Listen to Your Body and Regain Your Health," because all those messages like stress and anxiety and depression and pain and any symptom, that's messages from your body telling you like, pay attention, something is going on with you, and we're like put band-aid, drinking, pills and going for something else, but not looking internally. And that's become a problem on the long run, right? So we forget about our own happiness and health and time for ourselves. And I also work with my clients to get it better for them, to schedule your own time and self-care, self-love. So I think that's what you do also when you do, say, like repatterning their energy, right? Because if we spend energy for ourselves, that's how we recharge our own battery. And our battery recharge, we can help somebody else and take care of different things.
Amen, sister. First of all, yes, 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 yes. And I have an iPhone and it says low power mode. And sometimes I'm like, I notice when I'm on low power mode, your word recall isn't as good. Your clarity, you feel foggy, you have trouble with task initiation. And it's interesting. I'm curious what you think, because I'm not denying that ADHD is a thing that people deal with and that there are genetic components and family history and all that stuff. But I don't really feel like it's all fully just a genetic thing. I feel like we have a culture that is perfectly designed to wire our brains and our body chemistry for what we're calling ADHD, which I think is kind of not the best term for it. And then there's so many differences between men and women. But I feel like when you're on low power mode and you're malnourished or undernurtured or whatever the thing is, and sped up and pushed to your limit, and there's no space for pleasure and play and joy and connection and nature and like oneness, feelings of oneness with something so infinitely loving and so much bigger than ourselves. And to really have that guide our lives when we're disconnected from that, it's like you expect task initiation to feel easy. You expect focus and concentration to feel easy. You expect in all these signals of overwhelm from the whole world. And we've never, as humans, known every problem happening all over the planet, which is kind of cool and super overwhelming to our primal biology, right? And so we're having all this inundation with stimulus, with the food we're eating or not eating, depending on how we take care of ourselves, all the chemicals in our environment, our bodies are just scrambling to try to figure out how do we deal with it. We don't have an evolutionary precedent for all these chemicals and all this weird stuff. Like your body's like just playing whack-a-mole constantly on a molecular level, on a frequency level. And then when you are tired and have brain fog and are having trouble focusing and following through and knowing what to focus on and whatever, now there's something wrong with you, like you're defective.
And also we have too much distraction, particularly
yeah.
for the young people. Their brain is still developing, and we have this and this and that, and like only one phone has so many apps. To make a phone work better, you need to remove some apps, right, from the phone to recharge the battery.
Bandwidth, yeah.
Just need to get rid of some apps from our life. Like we don't need this, we don't need that, and go to the nature and recharge from different sources.
And to look out for our future selves, the way we've evolved in our brains is that if we're stressed out from all the things, we think stress is just like relationships, job, money, kids, whatever, but it's like biological. Like if you're not getting all the nutrients you need, you're toxic, you're infected, like your immune system can't function, your nervous system's in hyperdrive, you're in fight or flight all the time from just your biology and your environment and society and everything, all the things. How's your system supposed to handle all that? And then we feel like failures because we couldn't do everything perfectly. It's unrealistic. So yeah, get rid of the crap, get rid of the apps, like simplify, shut some of it down. And it's interesting how bad we feel about ourselves when our bodies have such normal reactions to this toxic culture that's trying to override nature that we've normalized. Just things like slowing down and being gentle and being a little more realistic about what's normal and not normal in our biology. And one of the things I love telling people, because we've been told, no matter what you have, whether it's anxiety or some other health issue or mental health issue, we're told it's genetic, we're told it's just aging. So now we feel shame because we're old and we're genetically defective. Some people, I think, actually gravitate toward that because it takes the responsibility off of them. Like, oh, it's just my genetics and my age. So I'm just going to not make an effort and I'll just take pills and surrender to this. I actually use surrender in a positive way, like letting go and staying receptive. But some people, I think, give up and are disempowered and settle for below mediocrity. And one of the things I like to tell people is you're not defective or broken. And you can feel like when you feel anxious, when you feel exhausted, when you have all these weird symptoms or weight issues or whatever the thing is, and your body isn't working the way it used to or you wish it would, it's very natural and common to feel like your body's betraying you. But your body's your best friend. Because if you put your hand on a hot stove and your body didn't create a signal of pain, what would happen to your hand if you just left it there? You could lose your hand, right? So pain signals, emotional pain, mental distress, physical symptoms, that's nature's genius telling you you need nurture. And if your body didn't tell you, you couldn't do anything about it. The problem is a culture that says to override the warning lights on the dashboard. I was not raised knowing anything about cars. So if the car would make a noise or something on the dashboard, I'd be like, I'm a student, I don't have money to fix that. So I'd just like not take the car to the mechanic because I didn't want to know it was wrong because I didn't want to spend the money and I was overwhelmed and I didn't know how to fix it. And so I just wouldn't do anything about it. And then it would end up costing so much more money to fix my car because I let it go too far. And if I just, when it first started making a weird noise or the warning light first came on, if I'd done something about it, it would have been such a small fix. And I see that. And I did that in my health at one point. I literally remember there was a time where I didn't want to spend $300 on an ERMI test to test my house for mold. Number one, I didn't want to spend the money, but I didn't want to have mold because I knew it could make people so sick. And I was so sick. And so to avoid spending a few $100s or maybe even a few $1,000s, I ended up really kind of messing up my health and immune system, which would later, when I was in the house, I called the murder house because of the lead paint and the mold. I even think there were moments where maybe I could have spent $5,000 to $10,000, like to really deal with it fully. But I was so busy at that point, I was so busy focusing on my clients and taking care of everybody else that I was just letting it creep up on me until it was so debilitating I couldn't function. And then it ended up costing me multiple six figures in lost income. It sounds so cheesy to say you can't afford not to pay out of pocket to take care of your health. Like if you live somewhere where you can get integrative healthcare and holistic healthcare and functional medicine and the stuff that really works and get it covered by the government pays for it or your insurance pays for it, that's wonderful. That's great. But if you're in a private pay scenario, what would you do if your car broke down? You would pay for that. You would fix it. You would figure it out. If you lost your phone, you'd get another phone. Like you'd figure it out, right? I just think people need to learn to invest and not.
I would say prioritize.
Yeah.
You prioritize your own health because we prioritize something else, other people, a car, a house,
Right.
shopping, but we forget about or we don't want to look into our health. We don't want to look inside.
The people who have $1,000 TVs that if they break, they'll fix it right away, but they won't deal with their health. It's interesting because I've done discovery calls with literally millionaires who didn't want to spend a few $1,000s to fix something that had been like totally screwing their life up for years. But then they would go buy like a really expensive car or go on an expensive trip somewhere. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's interesting.
Why do you think it's that?
I think it's a little different for different people. One person in particular, I think it's more like a belief that people were trying to take advantage of him and that it shouldn't cost that much. People don't understand how much training to do like what you do or what I do. It is like you are living and breathing this stuff. Like you were going to trainings, you were learning, you were practicing, you're also holding so much energy. Speaking of energy, the space we hold for people, like in your mind and in your heart for your clients and patients, it's enormous. And to just manage all the different dimensions and all the different people and all the admin and all the logistics and the marketing and the overhead and it's a lot. So like people who are really bothering to study this stuff and learn to be badasses at helping people transform their lives, like I think it's worth it. I remember once in Hawaii, there was a municipal bus driver who was on food stamps who wanted to pay me to help her with her eating with her lifestyle so she could feel better. This was many years ago when I was kind of earlier in my practice. And I was so deeply touched by the fact that she was wanting to stretch. She cared that much. I gave her some extra time and like I went above and beyond to help her because I knew what a stretch it was. So I really think it has to do with self-love, with deservingness, with understanding, with trust, with seeing the value, not only the value of the service or of the person, but your worth. Because there's another woman who I know could totally afford it. And she actually told someone else, the person who referred her to me, I don't know how you can spend money and invest in yourself, but I just can't bring myself to do that. And I think it's a self-worth thing sometimes.
Yeah. A lot of time it's a self-worth. So I'm not worthy enough to spend money on myself.
Yeah.
That is going to help me in the long run, or they just don't see it, or sometimes they think it's too much work because they want just one pill.
That's another thing. They want a magic bullet. I met some really nice people from Kenya, like in my 20s, 30 years ago. They said they thought it would be cool for me to learn Swahili since I'm fluent in Spanish, And so my brother had Duolingo over Christmas and he's like, here, I'll give you access to you can have access to Duolingo for free. And I just picked Swahili. If I think about learning the whole language, I think about like walking down a street in Kenya or Tanzania and speaking Swahili and understanding people, it's overwhelming. Like, God, it feels like too much. But if I just take one lesson at a time, I'm great. I'm learning gradually over months, just a little at a time and a little at a time and a little at a time and a little at a time. And that's how it is. It's like when you're trying to heal something complex. See, people want this magic bullet because they don't want to deal with complexity or nuance. They don't want to spend money. They just want here, I'll give you this magical thing and it's going to fix everything. And then you don't have to put in effort and then you don't have to spend money. But it's like the cheap thrill. It's that same psychology. I want the cheap thrill. I want it really fast, but the payoff is never what we think it is, whether you're eating sugar or glued to your phone. And believe me, I have to really work on boundaries with this thing myself. I'm human too, right? But things that we invest in, things that we put energy into, that's what gives us the biggest, deepest, most profound and magical payoff. And if you have a mindset issue where you're not willing to put thought, energy, care into yourself, into your health, into your mental and physical well-being, you're not willing to love your future self. You're a unique expression of consciousness in the universe that will never be replicated again. And you are taking that light that is such a precious gift, and you're saying it doesn't matter, and you're squishing it, and you're putting it out, you're extinguishing it, and you're never knowing who you really are. If we let ourselves be malnourished and sick and stressed, and we don't tap into the depths and the expansiveness of what we're capable of as consciousness, as the universe experiencing itself in human form, it's like this unique thing that was like I don't know how many billionths of a chance that you would ever exist. And you went through a whole life and you never truly knew your gifts or your power or your beauty because you somehow thought you were the one human on the planet that was different and that you're not deserving and that you're not an expression of divinity and that you're not deserving or capable. And I don't believe that's true about anyone. Even if someone has become a horrendous like serial killer, I still think that being came in with that potential for light, and it just wasn't developed.
Yeah. Speaking on that note, how can someone start to tune in their own inner wisdom and begin listening to intelligence of their own body?
I love meditation, but the thing is you've got to stop believing that meditation means you're going to stop thinking, you're going to stop your mind. Your mind will stop when you're brain dead. It's more like sitting and being with. And one of the biggest skill sets, I think, is to be able to sit and be with what arises, even if it's a little uncomfortable. And then eventually there's this breakthrough moment that is very blissful, but you have to be with what arises. And I think people sometimes will sit to meditate and they'll be like, oh my God, there's so much like agitation and chatter. I can't, when I meditate, I get more agitated. I'm like, no, your brain was doing that. Your brain's doing that 24/7. You're just listening and noticing what your brain's always doing. But the thing is when you sit and be with it and listen to it, it's kind of like someone who needs to talk and then you listen to them and they get it off their chest and then they can just relax. That's how we are. We need to hear ourselves. We need to be with ourselves. And I have this meditation, I call it a magic brain trick meditation. It's 15 minutes. It's a super simple skill that once you've learned it, you can just memorize it and use it for the rest of your life. It's actually something called pendulation titration, but that's not as sexy as magic brain trick meditation because it really does feel like magic because it teaches you how to feel your body. It's a technique where you feel different kinds of sensations in your body and you go back and forth between pleasant and unpleasant feelings. And I'm not going to give away the plot line, but what ends up happening when you do that is really magical. And this works for anxiety. It works for trouble sleeping. It's very powerful for insomnia and trouble sleeping that's caused by your nervous system being overactivated. It was actually developed for physical pain by Peter Levine and Maggie Phillips, both PhDs. And then I put my own meditation spin on it. And so that's on my website if you want to check it out. Even when I switch over, I'm going to switch over to this quiz and mini course that I'm very excited about, where you're going to figure out which kind of anxiety you have, like how much of your anxiety is the health issues, how much of your anxiety is your lifestyle, how much of your anxiety is your nervous system and emotional patterning and thoughts. And then it's going to have a little mini course that you're going to be able to, for each of these kinds of anxiety, get some concrete things you can try to see. You'll start to feel better pretty quickly, and then you'll see the potential for it and hopefully be willing to go deeper. But I will still include that meditation. I don't think I'm going to ever stop giving that meditation away because it is so profound and it's so simple. And don't you find that some of the most simple things are the most powerful, and we miss them because we underestimate the power of simplicity?
We don't miss them, we dismiss them.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, because we always think like the more expensive, the better. The more out there, the devices, the pills, whatever, we always look for something like bigger and better, but it's always in front of you and it's inside of you. When you were talking about like how you listen to your brain, what came out to me is like you become your own therapist. So you listen to the thoughts that your brain is telling you, and you just sit and listen like therapists do, right?
But then you get the downloads, right? Because you get in the receptive modes. That's why I like doing some breath work first, because it can get you in a state. And if anyone ever wants to reach out on my website through my contact list and reach out and request, I have like a breath work playlist. It's right now unlisted on YouTube. I might make it listed at some point. But it's just like really basic. But there are certain breath work things that you can do for literally 5 minutes. It will completely shift your energetic state, your biological state, your brain state. You'll put you in different brain waves. And then now it's easy to meditate. It'll take it meditation from a struggle to easy and blissful. I call it basking in the glory. Like there's certain kinds of breath work that after you do them, it creates such a euphoric feeling that all you want to do is sit there and breathe and feel and be with what is, as opposed to fighting it, right? And then when you're in that receptive state, you access parts of your consciousness that is your wisdom brain, not only what's in your own consciousness and higher self that's in there, but I believe we become antennas and we tap into just the pool of consciousness that's like all of existence. I really feel like all intelligence and all of existence can be tapped into through meditation and consciousness and stillness and receptivity. I'm so like over people thinking that's kooky. I'm like, you know what? You're the one missing out. If you want to be dismissive of that and you haven't even tried it, like whatever, that's your problem. You're the one missing out. And, and I'm not against psychedelic assisted therapy or any of that stuff. Although I do get annoyed when people call mushrooms plant medicine because it's a fungi, not a plant. But anyway, you can have psychedelic type experiences and the wisdom and intelligence that can come through us. Like I've had experiences where I meditate and I go so deep. And then as I'm standing up, like I'm getting up from my meditation, I'm not thinking about trying to solve anything or whatever. And I'll get this, I call it our inner genius. I've named my whole business after it. But I'll get this little whisper, because it's always a whisper. It's not pushy. It's a whisper, but it's like, it's so loving and so still and so quiet and so wise. And it'll say, go look up this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I remember I got one of those whispers and I went and researched something and I found evidence that the thing that had come to me could actually help someone. And I actually helped a woman avoid a heart transplant. They at least were going to put in a defibrillator, if not do a transplant. And she ended up needing neither. And her ejection fraction went from like 21 to like gradually over time back to normal.
Amazing stories. And how can people find you, the all information that you talk about it and all your courses and meditations?
Sure. They can go to innergeniushealth.com, or you can just Google my name, because there's no one in the Googleverse that has their name spelled Traci with an I and Potterf with an F, Potterf. So you can just stalk me, but you can find my website, Inner Genius Health, and then you can get the meditation right there at the top. There's also a link if you want to have a conversation. It says schedule to apply to work with me. And I don't mean to be snobby about apply to work with me, but I want to make sure it's a match. I really want to work with people who are coachable, who are open-minded, who are willing to do what it takes to create an amazing life. Because to me, I don't think we're just in the business, I'm sure you feel this way too, of fixing whatever the symptom is, but of helping people have the most amazing, beautiful gift of a life possible. Let's get rid of your anxiety and help you with your chronic health issues, but let's make your life amazing. You're capable of that. All of us are, every single one of us. And the only barrier is disbelief, dismissiveness of ourselves and of others and of what's possible.
Great message. Last question before I let you go. Our podcast name is Harmonic Alignment. What harmonic alignment means to you?
Oh, yes. To me, I think of harmony. Like when you hear music that's amazing and powerful and how it can change your body, we're in a universe of frequency of energy. One of the reasons I really resonated with the name of your podcast is because I like to talk about us having a cellular symphony, like a symphony of cells, and that when they play out of tune, we feel unhappy and sick. But when we can harmonize our symphony, then that's when we can play beautiful music, having a beautiful life. And so to me, that harmonic alignment is living in alignment with the inner wisdom, with our evolutionary biology, with nature, with consciousness, with what we really are.
Oh, yes, beautiful. Everyone has different interpretation. That's why I like to ask everyone what's for them. So beautiful message. Thank you, Dr. Traci, for your wisdom, for everything that you do in the world, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Are you ready for your Energy for Life bioenergetic nest scan? Dr. Larisa Sharapova and myself, Priscilla Koblenz, offer personal, private, 90-minute consults to get you back to optimal health and well-being. For more details, visit the show notes or check out harmonicalignment.co. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Harmonic Alignment. If something resonated with you, we would love to hear about it. Please consider leaving us a 5-star review and subscribing so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Thank you. The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider. Carefully read all labels and directions. The products and information received through the podcast should not be used to replace a consultation or advice from your healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or have any healthcare questions, please promptly call your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Larisa Sharapova and Priscilla Koblenz, and the producers are not responsible for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained in this podcast. This podcast may contain endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct financial benefit to the product or services referenced.